But first, breaking tonight, protesters and law enforcement scuffle in Minneapolis following yesterday's fatal shooting of a woman by a federal immigration agent. The Trump administration is again insisting the agent acted in self-defense after the driver of a vehicle tried to attack him with the car. Correspondent Garrett Tenney in Minneapolis tonight with the very latest. Good evening, Garrett.
John, good evening. Governor Tim Walz has now authorized the Minnesota National Guard to be staged and on standby to assist state and local police if protests get out of hand, something he was criticized for not doing sooner following the death of George Floyd. Heated protest in the cold of Minnesota today, leading to more than a dozen arrests outside a federal building in Minneapolis.
Shame on you all! Shame on you!
Hundreds of people taking to the streets across the city a day after an ICE agent shot and killed 37-year-old Renee Good after federal officials allege she attempted to use her SUV as a deadly weapon.
Shame! Oh my God!
The FBI now handling the investigation into the incident alone after state officials claim they were pushed out and denied access to case materials and evidence from the scene.
Minnesota must be part of this investigation. When Kristi Noem was judge, jury, and basically executioner yesterday, that's very, very difficult to think that they were going to be fair.
Federal officials say the FBI has jurisdiction since they believe this was an attack on a federal law enforcement officer who they say was fully justified in what he did.
And the officer feels as though his life was in jeopardy. It was used to perpetuate a violent act that this officer took action to protect himself and to protect his fellow law enforcement officers.
The shooting scene now a memorial where faith leaders held a demonstration today calling for ICE to leave.
We need accountability and we need it now.
Yes.
Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison says he believes there are multiple charges the state could bring against the ICE agent, and state and county prosecutors are now exploring how they can keep their investigations into this shooting going. John?
All right, that'll put him at odds with the federal government. No question about that. Garrett Tenney for us. Garrett, thank you. Fox News has confirmed that an independently owned Marriott hotel in Bloomington, Minnesota, has fired an employee suspected of doxing ICE agents who were staying there. The worker allegedly leaked photos of the agents' names and emails, along with surveillance images of them in the front lobby. This comes just days after Hilton Hotels dropped its affiliation with the Minneapolis area hotel that refused to allow immigration agents to book rooms there. The billions of scam taxpayer dollars in Minnesota has prompted President Trump to designate an official to concentrate on growing reports of government fraud. This comes as the president and his team continue to support the immigration agents' actions during yesterday's shooting incident. Our senior White House correspondent Peter Ducey joins us now with that part of the story. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, John. Officials here argue the ICE officer involved in this deadly shooting yesterday has absolute immunity. And the vice president himself says that because 6 months ago this officer was dragged behind a car, he may have been a little sensitive to the idea of being rammed by a car.
President Trump and his entire administration stand fully behind the heroic men and women of ICE.
The president tells the New York Times, "I want to see nobody get shot. I want to see nobody screaming and trying to run over policemen either." And top officials are confident the ICE officer's deadly force was justified.
This woman is dead is because she tried to ram somebody with her car, and that guy acted in self-defense. That is why she lost her life, and that is the tragedy.
Vice President Vance went so far as to suggest victim Renee Good was brainwashed into believing anti-ICE sentiment while praising the ICE officer she allegedly antagonized.
He deserves a debt of gratitude, and I think the media prejudging and talking about this guy as if he's a murderer is one of the most disgraceful things I've ever seen from the American media.
A new assistant attorney general position has been created to investigate fraud nationwide, similar to what has been discovered recently in Minnesota.
Minnesota, unfortunately, is ground zero for what may be one of the most egregious welfare scams in our nation's history.
Vice President Vance claims Minnesota is ground zero for a sophisticated fraud ring and a shadowy left-wing network of agitators. Who do you think is behind this broader left-wing network?
Well, it's one of the things we're going to have to figure out, but here's the way that I put it. When somebody throws a brick at an ICE agent or somebody tries to run over an ICE agent, who paid for the brick?
President Trump just announced he is pulling another lever to try to make it more affordable to buy a home. He is telling Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to buy $200 billion worth of mortgage bonds. That is something he says will lower rates and make monthly payments cheaper. John?
All right, we'll see what impact it has. Peter Ducey for us tonight at the White House. Peter, thank you.
I'm Dana Perino, along with Brian Kilmeade, Jessica Tarlov, Jesse Waters, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five.
Oh!
Oh my God, drag him back!
Tensions running high in Minneapolis for a second day after a woman was shot dead by an ICE agent. DHS says 37-year-old Renee Good used her car as a weapon against a federal officer. And we are now learning that the ICE agent in question was the same agent who, back in June, was dragged more than 100 yards by a car driven by an illegal immigrant sex offender while trying to make an arrest. The agent needed 33 stitches, but he did make a full recovery. Vice President J.D. Vance taking over the briefing room with some harsh words for the media over the way he thinks they've been covering the shooting.
She was trying to ram this guy with her car. He shot back. He defended himself. He's already been seriously wounded in law enforcement operations before, and everybody who's been repeating the lie that this is some innocent woman who was out for a drive in Minneapolis when a law enforcement officer shot at her, you should be ashamed of yourselves. This is absolutely a tragedy, but it's a tragedy of the making of the far left. They have radicalized a very small segment of the population, taught them that ICE agents are engaging in wide-scale violation of people's rights. There's a part of me that feels very, very sad for this woman, not just because she lost her life, but because I think she is a victim of left-wing ideology.
Liberal commentators and some Democrats are ramping up their rhetoric against ICE.
It was an outright murder.
ICE has been carrying out state-sanctioned violence in our communities.
This is a George Floyd moment. This administration has gone too far.
Blood is clearly on the hands of those individuals within the administration who've been pushing an extreme policy that has nothing to do with immigration enforcement.
And I'll say it again, is bull. That is bull. The way they've been conducting themselves is also bull.
Very, very difficult for Minnesotans to think in any way this is going to be fair when Kristi Noem was judge, jury, and basically executioner yesterday.
Because there are going to be protests around this entire country because of the state-sanctioned execution.
Jesse, safe to say this did not de-escalate today. No. It actually escalated.
I mean, illegals have killed thousands of women in this country. They've burned them with cigarettes. They've raped them. They've done despicable things. You never hear the Democrats talk about that. And those were not defensive killings like this was. This is a woman who was in severe crisis. She lived a very sad and very chaotic life. She was divorced from her first husband and lost custody of her 2 kids. Another husband, she lost him. Then she gets involved with a female partner. They flee the country to Canada after the last election. They come back to Minneapolis from out of town. They drop their kid off, the young one, at a daycare center so they can do what? So they can get in the middle of an incredibly dangerous law enforcement operation. And everybody that witnessed it said she was the lead provocateur. She was the lead car and been stalking this team of investigators all day long in the snow. So these guys get trapped. They get boxed in because the car gets stuck. And she gets in the way. And she doesn't comply. And one thing leads to another. And she slams her foot on the accelerator. And this guy, you know, he thought he was going to get run over. And he'd been dragged before, got 30 stitches in his arm, was in the hospital. So you know how tense this stuff is. Why are women putting themselves in dangerous situations? These ICE agents are arresting alleged terrorists, according to Noem. A pedophile they got yesterday. They picked up a drug trafficker, guys who beat their wives. These are incredibly tense situations. You do not put yourself in the middle of that. And it looks like the Democrat media industrial complex is preying on these vulnerable women. And they brainwash them into putting their lives on the line to protect illegal aliens. Illegal aliens that are stealing millions from children. And so why are they doing that? They're doing that because they want the illegal aliens to stay here. They want the criminal illegal aliens to stay here. Now, you always hear the Democrats say, oh, you know, we want the aliens that commit crimes, we want them worst out first. No. If they wanted the worst out first out, they'd keep them in jail and let ICE get them there. But the entire city's just releasing them willy-nilly into these neighborhoods, and you have to go in blind with no local backup because it's a sanctuary city and pick them up. So you don't get in the middle of that. And they're doing this for money and power. The more immigrants in this country, the more votes and political power Democrats get, and the more they can fleece the welfare system.
Jessica, I haven't had a chance to hear from you on this yet today.
No. Happy to be back. Happy New Year, everybody. It's my first time back. So, Jesse, you just said this woman is in severe crisis. She was boxed in. If you watch the whole video...
No, she was boxed in.
That's what she was boxed in.
No, I said the team was boxed in.
Okay, the team was boxed in by... Once she moved over, she pulled to the side, and then she actually waves another ICE officer past her, right? So she's in such severe crisis that she can be polite in traffic and say, you go ahead, and then you hear her actually audibly saying, I'm pulling out, right? She signals exactly what she's doing. She starts to move forward, and everyone should go and watch. The New York Times has about 3.5 minutes of footage coming from every angle, and this is what they brought up to President Trump when they were meeting with him last night, when he said, you know, the officer, the brave officer, and after he tweeted, it's hard to believe that the officer is alive when he walked away completely unscathed. We can see that on video as well. But the footage contradicts the administration on almost every level of what they've said. Renee Good waving the vehicle by. The officer was to the side of the car when he drew the gun. He leaned over the hood for the first shot. You can see that on the angle, too. That he fired 2 more shots at arm's length on a 90-degree angle. And it almost doesn't matter, actually, what she was doing, because she didn't have another weapon. According to DOJ policy, which they should be in compliance with, it says deadly force may not be used solely to prevent the escape of a fleeing suspect. Firearms must be discharged at a moving vehicle unless a person is threatening deadly force by other means than the vehicle, and no other means of defense exist, including moving out of the path. He could clearly move out of the path because he did, and that's why he was unscathed in this. I don't know why it wasn't good enough for Secretary Noem or the president or the vice president to say, this is a tragedy, we need to investigate this. And not only do we need to investigate it, we need the FBI to work with local officials on the ground in Minnesota, which apparently they do not want to do. And Governor Walz was talking about that as well. That would have been the responsible thing to do here. And talking as if there is no potential that this officer is at fault with what happened feels like you're getting a little bit ahead of your skis, especially when there is so much footage that contradicts the story that the administration is giving.
So there is an investigation underway, Brian, but the shot comes right through, as Paul Morrow was saying today, directly into the front windshield. So for that to happen,
there's no way that officer's life wasn't at risk. And I think you should be investigated. It's going to be investigated, no doubt about it. And the problem is, if this was just one day, hey, what's going on? Did you hear about ICE in the cities? I go, yeah, whoa. No, we're watching this thing play out since Donald Trump became president. First in California, over in Los Angeles, then in Chicago. Now we see it over in Minneapolis. We see it in New Orleans. When you have a cooperative governor, you don't really have these incidents. You're looking at a situation which, if you look at the mayor and the governor of that state, if you look at the mayor and governor of Chicago, you definitely look at the mayor, Karen Bass, and the governor of California. They basically set the trap for this day. And you see the shootings that took place in Dallas, aiming at police officers from a roof. They killed 2 illegal immigrants. But they are building up to this. They have made ICE the bad guys. And that's why attacks are up 1,000% on ICE in the last year, and death threats are up 8,000%. And that's just some of the stories and some of the stats. You can't just say, what happened on that block at that time in that 5 minutes. You have to say what built up to that. How threatened were these guys? I think it's important. It's a nuance of the story that he was hit and dragged 50 feet and got 20 stitches in his arm. But when you go out there, you got to put all that behind you and just react to that one situation. I do think you're 100% right. Let's wait for the investigation. But I think that this story was waiting to be written the minute these governors made the enemy of ICE, threatened local police to go after the federal police. And it's up to the cops right now to tell your mayors and governors it is not okay for us not to back up ICE and answer calls, because men and women in uniform have to have each other's back. They can't let politicians get in the way of law enforcement. And if everybody agrees to do that, keep politics out of it, and back each other up, everyone's going to be safer.
The podcaster Jennifer Welch, the very left-wing one, Greg, she said, this is a George Floyd moment. It's like, that's what they wanted.
That's what they wanted, exactly. This is why, look, I predicted that this was going to happen. And in my opinion, no one has to watch this, and no one has to have an opinion about the shooting. Yeah. Let somebody else, let the experts figure that out. Don't be drawn into this. You don't have to play by the rules of the radicals. So the question, and Jesse brings it up, is why would a mother of a young child, a widow, consistently participate in aggressive confrontations with law enforcement? Why did she feel emboldened to break the law in an endless theater of chaos? Swept up in the latest demonization narrative that eggs on illegal and stupid behavior. Don't blame ICE. She wasn't the target. They were. And it was believed by the people involved that it would be fine, that there would never be any consequences. It was all part of this mania that we've talked about that cuts across a whole bunch of issues, whether it's Trump, trans, BLM, Israel. The table is set with this manic hysteria where radicals believe that they gain leeway by branding the rest of us as an existential evil. You know what this made me think about? The Tide Pod Challenge. Do you remember that in 2017 when stupid teens were filming themselves eating Tide Pods and then they get poisoned? Do you know what Tide's response was? Use for washing, not eating. The point being, if you're going to eat Tide Pods, there's not much else we can do except tell you not to do it. The same here. We can tell you, don't break the law. Don't block traffic. Don't harass law enforcement every day and then flee the scene. But if you do, wow, you definitely share responsibility in that, just like the teen who films himself eating a Tide Pod. So you can investigate this shooting, have at it. But it never would have happened if the situation had presented itself. And that is on the Democrats who willed it into being with rhetoric, the same kind of amplification of demonization that got Charlie Kirk killed and Donald Trump shot. But this is for different reasons. Their motivation is to gin up the activist base. They put targets on ICE. They put targets on ICE, and then they blame ICE for defending themselves. Think about that. We can't play that game anymore. We are done with it, and we're not going to explain it to you. We're not going to explain to you why this is wrong. We don't have to. You're not going to find people hoax us anymore. We've been red-pilled by your lies. So we're no longer beholden to radical idiocy. If you want to block a street, if you want to hinder and harass law enforcement, that's your responsibility. If you had listened to me, some kid would still have his mother. But instead, you listen to people like Walz, the people who try to evade their responsibility by projecting their own guilt on other people.
Well, there might be even more, because it doesn't seem like Governor Walz wants to tamp it down.
He is a literal douchebag.
He's reckless.
Yeah.
But he's trying not to...
literally, he is a douchebag.
But he's trying not to talk about fraud. So he's desperate to change the subject.
Same with Jacob Fry, because he's involved in that too.
My next guest is in Minnesota. He's been to the shooting scene, and he has talked directly to the agent involved. It's ICE Acting Executive Associate Director of Enforcement and Removal Operations, Charles Marcos. Thank you for being with us here today. You've spoken to the agent involved in this incident. First, I understand he went to the hospital. So how is his health, and what did you hear from the agent?
After I spoke with him, he's doing well. He sustained some injuries, but his well-being is of utmost importance to myself and the agency. and the safety of his family. So after speaking with him and giving him some words of encouragement, I'm sure he'll make a full recovery and hopefully be back to us soon.
I'm sure it's not hard for him to see across the social media scroll or across his television screen to see that he's being called today a murderer. Does he know that? And what does that make him think?
I'm sure he has, but I know he also has been trying to stay away from any social media or news, just for the sake of his family and his well-being. So,
what can you tell us about your conversation?
I don't think it's fair to call him a murderer. He was out there doing his job. Just that, he was doing well. I called to check on him. I know him personally, so I wanted to make sure he and his family were doing well. I saw him last 2 weeks ago when I was here 2 weeks ago. I arrived on the ground Monday morning to come out here and lead our troops out here in this surge effort.
What can you tell us about an ICE officer in this particular situation? How are your agents trained to deal with standing in the path of a car oncoming, accelerating? What is the appropriate training and response from an ICE agent?
Well, first I want to make sure that everybody understands that the driver of this vehicle made the conscious decision to accelerate and go towards and try to ram one of our officers, putting him in serious bodily, the threat of serious bodily harm or even death. We're trained that we can use deadly force in an instance like this anytime a subject has, when the officer believes that the subject poses an imminent threat to personal security and or to harm to death.
And what, Marcus, I can only presume that you have a little more information than that might be available to the rest of us, whether that's through your conversation with the agent or other agents there on scene that day. Is there any background that you can give us in the moments that we don't see in these video clips about what led up to this incident?
Sure. The driver, she had been harassing some other of the vehicles, one of our other vehicles. She then, our agents lost her at a red light. She then turned back around, went to that area, and continued to harass and impede the enforcement actions of our officers there on that street by blocking them, using her vehicle to block our vehicles, to use her vehicle basically as a barrier across the street, the public roadway, and impede our officers. Our officers were trying to get around her. Every time they would try to go either in front of the vehicle or behind the vehicle, she would then reverse or go forward, trying to hit our other vehicles. And
she was trying to hit your vehicles?
She was trying to get in the way of our other vehicles, whether it be hitting them or to stop them from proceeding forward. So, at that time, the officers, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, you've used the word harass, so I was going to ask for a little bit of color on what that means to harass your officers.
Sure, they follow us. A lot of these people follow us around. They follow our vehicles. I've been involved in those where people get behind us, start honking, yelling at us, honking their horn, just calling us names, whether it be just to indicate that they're following somebody from ICE or just to give us a hard time. That's what they do. They'll be behind us, or they'll cut us off. They'll use their vehicle to stop our vehicle's forward progress.
And that's what this individual was doing, you tell me, and you're saying to me that that's not the first. What we see on video is not the first time that your officers had encountered her on that day. And in those previous encounters, she had used her vehicle to block, impede, harass, and possibly, as you suggested, I'm just trying to fill in the blanks for what I've heard from you, hit your vehicles, drive it sounds like in somewhat of a reckless manner, culminating in this moment we begin to see on video?
Correct. Yes, she was doing all of the above. She was doing whatever she could in order to impede us and harass us.
And what was the goal of the agents in that moment when they were approaching her vehicle? Was it to arrest her, to get her out of the vehicle? What was the goal of those agents?
The agents were going to go up there and pull her out of the vehicle, make the arrest, and get that vehicle out of the way so we could continue forward on our enforcement efforts.
Right. And one last question, Marcus, just so I understand. I had somebody ask me, is it policy for an officer to stand in front of a vehicle? But the truth is, and I would love for you to answer that, but I'm not sure he was standing in front of the vehicle. As I've seen video, he was to the right of the vehicle. She then turns into his path. So what is the policy for an officer around the vehicle like that in that situation?
Well, that was a very fluid incident, right? That vehicle that she was in was backing up, then going forward. The officer wasn't positioning himself to be in front of the vehicle. He was positioning himself to cover the other officers that were attempting to make the arrest.
Right, and all of this unfolding within seconds. All of this happening in seconds.
In seconds, and as you said, you can clearly tell that she went right at our officer.
Yeah, you know, I've looked at that video. He's to the right of the front fender. The car then turns into the path that he's already standing in. He leaps out, takes the shot. We wish him the best of luck when it comes to health and also the public slander that he's receiving today. Marcos Charles, thank you for what you guys do.
First to correspondent Alexis McAdams on the ground in Minneapolis. Hi, Alexis.
Hi, Martha. Well, another protest here in Minneapolis, and this one's in front of the federal building here. The reason these protesters came here is because they knew these DHS agents were going to be here. So I just want to set up what's going on right now. You can see this is the federal building there in the background in Minnesota. This is Border Patrol. So you see them in the camo, the green, the yellow. These guys are basically working, Martha, security because ICE doesn't have help when they're on the ground here for local law enforcement. They don't have anybody that's out here to help them. The sheriff doesn't respond, nobody does. And then when you have these protesters like this, and we'll walk a little closer, they need some backup. We saw at least a dozen arrests so far today and possibly counting. Things escalate and then they kind of dip off. Then they escalate again. They're calling them murderers. They're saying they shouldn't be here and that they believe DHS and ICE killed one of their neighbors. They don't believe that she was doing anything wrong. But when you ask the feds, they make it very clear that they say this woman is using her car to block off an active ICE operation. Whether you like these agents or not, whether you like ICE or not, the White House says in its law you can't interfere with these investigations. You can't put your hands on federal agents either, like we've seen here. So that's why those arrests have come. We've seen a few people spit on agents. They were tackled, Martha. And I want to show you some of the other things we've seen. I don't know if we pulled up the video because I'm just out here looking around at what's happening on the ground. But one of the people tried to stop these agents from leaving. And they feel like they have a lot of power here when they hear the mayor of their city saying ICE should get out. And they don't hear much from the governor except please behave. We saw what happened in 2020. The question is it going to happen again? We'll keep you posted here on the ground, Martha.
Yeah. I mean, look at that guy getting in front of a moving car. If we didn't learn a terrible lesson about this yesterday, I mean, you got to just question the judgment of these individuals and also just the basic of yesterday. If a federal law enforcement asks you to get out of your car and you do it, your likelihood of surviving that interaction is very high. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of tension on the streets right now. Alexis, thank you very much. We'll check back in with you later.
All right, Sandra, let's bring in Jonathan Turley, George Washington University law professor and a Fox News contributor. So we heard the vice president a short time ago saying he fully believes that the shooting was justified because the officer was in fear of his life, that the woman was aiming her car toward him. There's numerous angles of what happened that were taken on cell phones. One of them, and I want to put it up on the screen right now here, in the highlight, as the car moves forward, there's the officer in front of the car. It does appear to make contact, at least with his left side to some degree. The contact was made, if you take a look at it, just before he pulled the trigger for the first shot, then he fires two subsequent shots. The fact that there appears to have been contact, does that justify the use of deadly force?
Well, the evidence does tend to support the officer here. Under the standard of Tennessee versus Garner and later cases, you look at the totality of the circumstances. And the key here is that the car is treated as a weapon. If it is moving at fast speed towards an officer, if there's an imminent collision, these officers are trained to treat that as a lethal weapon. The key here is that she does appear, in my view, to be fleeing the earlier police officer. She was ordered to get out of the car. Now, whether she was aiming at the officer or she was fleeing, under the standard, it may not matter in the sense that what the officer was encountering was a car that was rapidly approaching him. He didn't have a second. He had a fraction of a second to make a decision on how to address an imminent threat. That's why many of us have said it does fall within the standard set out by the court. Now we'll get more videos, we'll get more evidence. You don't want to say that this is now conclusive, but what is outrageous are when you have people like Mondami and Fry calling this officer a murderer. It's outrageous. I mean, the evidence, if anything, favors him, and I think it does favor him fairly strongly as we see more of these videos.
You know, I've seen a slow motion video, or one of the videos was slowed down so that you can literally watch it frame by frame. And there's a moment that as the driver after she backs up, she puts it in drive, her left wheel, you can see, is aimed to the left, which would be aimed toward the agent that is in front of the car. The tire spins on some ice before she then turns the wheel forward. And people have posited that if the car had traction then, it would have lurched directly toward the officer. But listen to what the ACLU said in the press release here. ACLU and ACLU of Minnesota demand immediate action after ICE shoots and kills Minnesota woman. For months, the Trump administration has been deploying reckless, heavily armed agents into our communities and encouraging them to commit horrifying abuses with impunity. Congress must rein ICE in before what happened in Minneapolis today happens somewhere else tomorrow. But when you look at the totality of what happened yesterday, that this woman, according to DHS officials, had been stalking ICE officers throughout the day, as apparently they had tried to push a car out of the snow. And what we see across the country when it comes to civilians trying to get in the way of these ICE officers, what do you make of the ACLU statement?
Well, I think that's the problem, is the disconnect from the legal standard itself. I don't have much doubt in my mind that the officer, unless we see something truly contrary coming out in terms of videos, that this officer will be have been found to have engaged in a lawful execution or discharge of his weapon. Now, there could still be some evidence that is coming forth. The key here to remember is that regardless of what her intent was, whether it was to flee or to run over an officer, she directed her car directly at an officer who was very close and took actions within a second. That's the type of thing that courts have routinely said they're not going to second guess this split-second decision. Now, as for Governor Walz saying that he's going to call out the National Guard to protect citizens against the federal government, that seems rather antebellum. He should probably talk to Jeff Davis about that. I don't know what he means by it, but the federal government has a right to be there. You cannot prosecute this officer in state court. They all know that, and they also know that they're unlikely to prevail in this case under the operating standard.
All right, well, we'll see where this all goes from here. As Jonathan Fahey was saying, he wouldn't be surprised if the state tries to bring charges, then it ends up in federal court and those charges would be thrown out, because there is immunity for federal law enforcement officers from state charges if they are acting in the line of duty. Professor, always great to catch up with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
My next guest has been critical of the Venezuela attacks, calling it reckless and illegal. It's Democrat Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton, who joins me now. Congressman, thank you for being with us here today.
Good to see you, Will.
You called this reckless and illegal. You have also in the past, Congressman, said that Maduro's a bad guy, an authoritarian.
Yeah.
So very simple question. Is it good today that he's not in charge of Venezuela?
His regime is still in charge. In fact, in the same indictment that Trump used to justify this massive military operation to take him out of Venezuela, it includes his vice president, who's now running the country. So I don't think it's regime change.
Yes, Congressman, presumably with a lot more influence from the United States of America, but Nicolas Maduro is in jail in New York City. In jail in New York City. I'm just curious, though, with him in jail in New York City, I'm just really curious as a simple proposition. Isn't that good that Maduro is in jail in New York?
Yeah, it's good that he's in jail. It's not good that we conducted an illegal military operation to get him, and it's not good that his regime is still in charge repressing Venezuelans, despite the Secretary of State's promise that that wouldn't happen.
Well, we'll
because
see
he has
how that
control
plays
of
out.
the situation.
We will see how
No,
that
it's
plays
playing
out.
out right now because they're not even allowed to have cell phones in Venezuela now, which they actually were allowed to have under Maduro. So I don't think this is going too well so far.
Congress, it's been 2 days. The mission, by the way, took 2 hours. Would you say the mission was good? Was it a successful mission? No Americans significantly injured, or certainly none killed. Very little damage to American military property. Conducted in just, I think it was over 2 hours. Which, by the way, I appreciate your service. You're a former Marine. Wouldn't you say this is also
veteran,
good?
Yeah.
Yeah, Marine veteran. This is also
absolutely,
good?
Will, the military operation was brilliant. But no matter how brilliant a military operation is, it doesn't matter if it was illegal. Look, I was very proud of our military invasion of Iraq because it was very successful. Well, look, I just want to say, as a Marine, I was very proud of how successful our operation was to invade Iraq. But it turned out it was based on lies. It turned out there was no plan for what came next. It turned out that Bush got us into a forever war,
all very
which
fair.
a lot of MAGA people have criticized, right?
Hey,
so I remember when the military operation was brilliant, but I'm going to have a lot of questions about what comes next.
Very fair. We don't have to get hung up on that. I'm just trying to sort of run through a checklist of things that were good. It's good that Maduro's in jail. It was good the way it was conducted, the military operation. I presume you think it's good if China, Iran, and Russia have less influence in Venezuela as an outcome of this event. That would also be good.
It's absolutely good if China and Russia have less influence anywhere. If Russia and China feel empowered to do the same illegal kind of operation that Trump just justified to the world, then that's a problem for us. Because if China does this, if China decides to do this in Taiwan, it starts a war. And that's actually really bad for America.
Yeah, but we're talking about Venezuela. And just one more. Isn't it really good the United States has influence? Isn't it really good the United States has influence over 40% of the world's oil output? Between Canada, Latin America, and the United States, we now have significant influence over 40% of the world's output. That, I think, would also join the checklist of Maduro in jail, a successful military operation, pushing influence of Chinese and Russians out of Venezuela. You'd have to also agree with me, it's good that we now control such a large percentage of the world's oil, right?
The question is, one, do we actually control it? And two, is it worth American lives? Because when I talk to Americans, I don't know how much time you spend actually talking to American parents, but when I talk to American parents, they say they do not want to risk their kids' lives for Venezuelan oil.
And
it's great that we we absolutely risked their lives. We risked a lot of Americans' lives, and that 7 were wounded, 2 grievously wounded. They're hopefully recovering right now. But you have to ask Americans, is that worth it? And you know what? That's why we have a process in Congress to vote on going to war. It's part of a democracy.
And Congressman, that's all very fair. But I would suggest that if you spoke to those special forces, those Delta Force men, I don't think a single one of them would agree with you that this wasn't worth the risk. Now, the American populace, we'll see.
Well, you're
they don't
assuming
want a forever war. Hold on.
I know you.
Listen, Congressman, I talk to Americans too. I'm in Dallas, you're in D.C. I feel pretty confident about how I'm in touch with Americans. Okay, listen, finally, on the illegality. This is your major point. In the end, this is your major point, that you think it's illegal for the president to conduct this action. I'm going to ask you this. Do you think it was illegal for the United States to invade Panama and take out Manuel Noriega?
They declared war on us first. That's a really important fact that you've just left out. Wait a minute. If a country declares war on us...
but there was no...
It's a very different situation, Will.
There was no congressional declaration of war. There was no congressional declaration of war in Panama.
They declared war on us. They declared war on us. Of course we should defend the country.
Congressman,
and by the way,
putting the proposition
do I think
together,
it was good? And by the way, do I think it was good that a lot of Americans... How many Americans died in Panama? How many Americans died in Panama?
More than died in Venezuela.
Quite a few.
23?
Yeah. A couple dozen. Do I think it was worth those American lives, those brave young American lives, just to get one drug lord out of Panama? No, I don't.
Okay. I want to leave this one here because by the way, for anyone watching that wonders, the congressman does have a heart out. He has, I guess, presumed something to do on Capitol Hill in about 3 minutes.
We have a vote on the ACA extensions, which Trump doesn't want to extend, but we want to actually make sure people can afford health care. And a lot of Republicans are going to vote with us,
anyone thinks that I dare to run away from this debate. Let's just be clear about the time constraints. And I'm not going to accuse the congressman, and he's not going to accuse me. Trust me, I've been here before, Congressman.
Sounds good.
I don't think you think Noriega's removal was illegal. I don't think you think taking out bin Laden was illegal, even though we didn't use the AUMF. And I think you're being a partisan by saying this is illegal. The president clearly has this authority. But I want to move to this in a limited time.
It's just Constitution. Read the Constitution. It's not hard.
I'm familiar. I went to law school. I don't know how familiar you are with the Constitution. I don't view you with that knowledge just because. Yeah.
That really
Did
puts you in touch with ordinary Americans. Okay.
No, you
All
didn't.
right.
No, that's a shifting scale. You said, do I understand the Constitution? I'm confident in both, that I understand the Constitution and the will of the American people. But one is not the same.
Well, actually,
so
the will of the American
confident.
people was clearly against this. And if you're so confident, then why don't we just have a vote on it?
There's not
Why
a
is it so
single
hard to have
poll
a
that
vote?
backs up what you had to say. The polls suggest that your voters, Democrat voters, think this was a success in Venezuela. Listen,
no.
I have
They
to
think the operation was a success. They don't think it was legal, and they did not think before it happened that we should go in willy-nilly, especially when the president said he wasn't going to do regime change. This was about
This is
drugs.
important. It's important, so we got to
Right?
get this, okay? You
Okay, we'll
posted
get to
this
it.
on X. Homan, talking about Tom Homan, you accused him of lying. You said, in your words, that what happened was not self-defense, this was murder. Speaking of the ICE incident in Minneapolis. The words are on the screen
That's
for
right.
anybody that wants to see that. Series of questions. Have you interviewed the officer, the ICE agent involved in this shooting?
No, but I've watched the video. Why are you so afraid to show the video
I know you've watched
to
the
your
video.
viewers?
No, I know you've watched the video. Have you seen
You
law
haven't showed it on
enforcement
your
reports?
show.
Have you?
Why don't you just
yes, I
show
have.
it and let people
I
use their
have.
own eyes?
Excuse me, I have. Have you seen the police reports, the law enforcement reports? Have you seen any of the paperwork filed by ICE on what happened in this incident?
No, I haven't seen all of that, just like you haven't seen the classified justifications for going to war in Venezuela, by the way.
Excuse me,
You haven't
Congressman.
seen that.
That's a complete
You haven't
diversion,
seen that.
red herring. Have you interviewed any
It's not a
eyewitnesses
red
on the
herring,
ground?
it's what we were just talking about.
Have you
You're
interviewed
talking
any
about whether this is
eyewitnesses
legal or
on the
not.
ground in Minneapolis? Have you interviewed any eyewitnesses?
Have I personally interviewed them? No,
Yes.
that's not my job. My job is to speak truth to power.
It's really
And when I
interesting,
look
your
at that
job.
video, I see murder. And I
So
think we should call it that if that's what happened. And by the way,
Congressman,
I've been
you
in
invoked
situations
the
like that. Have
concept
you ever
of due process. I've looked at your tweets.
Well,
You've talked about the
well,
concept
have
of
you?
due process. No, this is important for everybody to understand. You have a job, and you have highlighted to us as a congressman. You watched a viral video. I don't know how many videos you watched. There's multiple angles, but you watched a video. You didn't interview a witness. You didn't look at law enforcement reports. You haven't spoken to the agent involved. And with that limited knowledge of looking at a viral video, you went to social media and you condemned the federal officer to murder. You made that conclusion long before an investigation is played out. And I'm just curious, is that in line with your vision of due process?
Let me ask you this. When a United States senator says that our troops should follow the law, and the president of the United States says he should be hanged for saying that, he's condemning him to death?
I'm talking about you,
Do you think that that's responsible?
I'm talking
No,
about
but my
you.
question is, you love to criticize Democrats. Have you ever criticized a Republican like the President of the United States for doing something totally innocent, like telling Americans to follow the law, the President says someone should be hanged? The President condemns someone to death, and you can't say a thing. But when I see with my own eyes something that looks like murder, yeah, I'm going to call it the truth. And the courts will decide.
We'll
the
remember
courts will
that.
decide. But I am going to call it what I see it.
Yeah.
Because I think that we should speak truth
No
to
matter
power
what
well.
happens, no matter if there's assassination attempts on ICE, riots in the street, you will outpace due process.
Excuse me, they
based
just
upon a
murdered an
viral
American
video,
citizen.
Based upon
They
a
just
viral
murdered an
video
American
and call
citizen.
something murder.
Look, Will, I'm going to get death threats just for being on this interview, okay?
Well, I hope that's
I'm
not
not
the
afraid.
case. I really hope
well,
that's
it
not the
probably
case.
will be. I'll let you know when we're done, all right?
Well, please
but
do,
this
'cause that's not
ICE
what I wish for
officer,
you.
who, by the way, has been in a situation I've been in. I've been standing on the street, armed, trying to interdict vehicles, all right? If an 18-year-old Marine did what that officer did, like shot a woman as she was driving away, out of the way, he would be court-martialed.
Yeah,
And
I
we
hear
should-
your opinion.
we should
I have
expect
to
that
go
standard
because
for our
you have to
federal
go
officers.
vote. We're 2 minutes over your deadline to go vote, which I appreciate. I hope you don't get death threats. I do appreciate the conversation, even if it's antagonistic
I do
at
too.
times. I appreciate the back
Absolutely.
and forth. Congressman Moulton,
Will,
thank you.
thanks for having me on.
You bet. Welcome to the Will Cain Show, live from Texas, where we begin with a Fox News alert. The day after. Right now, the images we're seeing out of Minneapolis are a lot like the ones we showed you at this time yesterday. Protesters in fierce standoff with law enforcement. It's a physical representation, physical images of the two sides emerging over one video. That video, now watched by millions, has fueled two completely polar narratives. And all within minutes. One side crying murder, the other domestic terror. It's an instant Rorschach test. What is clear, at least one bullet hole can clearly be seen through the front windshield, and that indicates the agent was in the car's path when that shot was fired. Regardless, Like we've seen before, the divide is playing out intensely and immediately in the streets. Restraint, judgment, respect. Relying on a thorough investigation right now, that feels like the quaint, archaic remnants of a bygone era. Vice President Vance taking the media and Democrats and all of those who rush to judgment to task.
The president stands with ICE. I stand with ICE. We stand with all of our law enforcement officers. Many people in this room have been lying about this attack. She was trying to ram this guy with her car. He shot back. He defended himself. He's already been seriously wounded in law enforcement operations before, and everybody who's been repeating the lie that this is some innocent woman who was out for a drive in Minneapolis when a law enforcement officer shot at her, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Every single one of you. Tim Walz is a joke. His entire administration has been a joke. The idea that he's some sort of freedom fighter, he's not. He's a guy who has enabled fraud and maybe, in fact, has participated in fraud.
Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, typical deer in headlight eyes, jowls flapping, says, no, you're not hearing that from him, not inflammatory language.
I've not used inflammatory terms of what happened. I've asked us to find the answers. The only way we find the answers is a thorough investigation by nonpartisan professionals. We've delivered that. We've been able to do it. Everyone knows, globally, certainly here, that George Floyd, who was murdered a few blocks from this site, tore at the soul of who we were. But we healed. We built back trust.
No inflammatory language as he goes on in the very next breath to invoke George Floyd. Not to mention his casual statement suggesting that sitting there at his fingertips, at his disposal to stand off against the feds, is the National Guard.
I've issued a warning order to prepare the Minnesota National Guard. We have soldiers in training and prepared to be deployed if necessary. I said this yesterday. We've never been at war with our federal government. I think in this case that the National Guard is their main mission. They have a dual mission. There's the federal mission when they're under Title 10 orders, and then they're under Title 32 orders. In this warning order, there's nothing officially been done yet. If I am to activate them as the Commander-in-Chief of the Minnesota National Guard, I will issue the executive order to the Minnesota National Guard.
We've never been at war with the federal government, suggesting he now is, Minnesota now is, at war with the United States. And describing the National Guard not to quell protest, not to control riots, but to use the National Guard against President Donald J. Trump. We have not heard language like that since the 1960s, when state National Guards were employed to stop the federal integration of schools, including Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957, Mississippi in 1962, and Alabama in 1963. That is the insanity of this moment. Luckily, Vice President Vance took the reins and guided us back towards sanity.
The simple fact is, what you see is what you get in this case. You have a woman who was trying to obstruct a legitimate law enforcement operation. Nobody debates that. I can believe that her death is a tragedy while also recognizing that it's a tragedy of her own making and a tragedy of the far left who has marshaled an entire movement, a lunatic fringe, against our law enforcement officers.
Nevertheless, Mayor Jacob Fry, a somehow more feminine version of Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, Fry isn't making any apology for what he said yesterday.
I'm so sorry if I offended their Disney princess ears, but here's the thing. If we're talking about what's inflammatory, on the one hand, you got someone who dropped an F-bomb, and on the other hand, you got someone who killed somebody else. F-bomb, killing somebody. I think the more inflammatory action is killing somebody.
Here's an inflammatory word, the one that's going viral. It's like a tick. It's being repeated by almost every Democrat.
This was not unexpected, but it is egregious. It was an outright murder. This officer not only needs to be fired and suspended, but based on the video, he needs to be charged with murder.
At the end of the day, what we saw today is a murder. And murders in cold blood need to be prosecuted.
There are going to be protests around this entire country because of the state-sanctioned execution that we all saw unfold, unless there is some kind of justice that takes place.
State-sanctioned execution. Murder. That's the word we also heard used from Congressman Seth Moulton. He wrote on X, Tom Homan, stop lying to the American people. This was not self-defense. This was the murder of an innocent woman. Congressman Moulton will be on, and I will ask him about that statement a little bit later in the show. Now, you'd think they'd put the brakes on that kind of language when you look at history. When you look at, for example, right here in this city, a man who opened fire, an assassination attempt, a real assassination attempt in your home state, Congresswoman Crockett, at a Dallas ICE facility just last year. By the way, that attempted assassination ended up in the result of the murder of an illegal immigrant. But that action, that consequence, that didn't dial back Democrats. That didn't rein in rhetoric. And as we speak, people are doxing ICE agents. They're tracking them live, demonizing them. Maybe they feel empowered by people like failed late-night host Jimmy Kimmel.
That is the shirt I want to see. To ICE. Get the out of Minneapolis. Get the out of all of these cities.
That was the less offensive version of what he had to say and show. He also showed a T-shirt that said, Donald Trump wants to kill you. He's taken what's happened in Minneapolis and showing his public, small as it may be, that Donald Trump is responsible for murder. And he doesn't want to stop with a terrible tragedy in Minneapolis. He wants to kill you, says the quote-unquote comedian. No wonder his ratings. Bottom line, too many political disagreements, debates, discussions. They're just over. They're cast aside. Now we're in the era of violence. And the vice president says most in this business, in the media, playing along and begging for this.
I'm sorry, guys. What's going on here? You guys are meant to report the truth. How have you let yourself become agents of propaganda of a radical fringe that's making it harder for us to enforce our laws? You just asked me a question that presumed that the reason why this woman died is because she was engaged in legitimate protest. She tried to run somebody over with her car, and the guy defended himself when that happened. Next question.
Everybody's in on it. The media, the politicians, everybody's in on George Floyd 2026.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.